Okay, well, I thought I would do this simple little design. Irish blessings, I'll call it. I'm Irish. Our whole family's Irish. So I want to do something very basic to answer the question of, if you're total new to Popup Card Studio, I want to show you how to do it. So the first thing you're going to do is click on your icon to open up Popup Card Studio. And so let me close this one. I hope I don't close something I shouldn't. And I'll just open a new file here by clicking on this page icon. And when you do that, when you open a new file, you get the option to do a 90-degree open type or a 180-degree open type. And as Brian just said, right now the working portion of the software is the 90-degree open type. So make sure you have a little check in the box. You can toggle by clicking on the box. We want this box on the left to be orange. And the next thing we want to do is designate the size of our card when it's closed, when it's folded up. Now I like to keep my cards a standard A2 size, which is 5.5 by 4.25. I like the width to be 5.5 and the height to be 4.25, but you can use any size that you want. Just keep in mind that you're selecting the size of the closed pop-up card. So you're going from across the front just back to the middle of the card, and you're measuring that portion of it. When you have the size typed in, you would click on Create. This is the screen we come to when we're ready to create a card. This bottom section is called the bottom, and this section up here is called the back. If we click on the tab on the left to view properties, you'll see that there's a grid here. This grid right now is on the back. As you can see, edit side says back. If I click on the down arrow and click on bottom, then the grid goes to the bottom. Now what we need to be concerned about first, I'll go back to the back, is how far away from the back of the card is the grid. Now if I right click in the middle and drag to the right, I can see that this grid is 1 inch away from the back as position shows it up here. And anything I place on this plane where the grid is, it's going to be 1 inch from the back of the card. Now once I've turned this around, I can get back to the original position by going up to the top of the screen and clicking on the reset zoom, and it takes us back to the original. So anything that I add right now is going to go 1 inch from the back. Well, let's suppose that I would like to make this word that I'm making be at 2 inches. I just type in 2, and this plane moved out to 2 inches, as you can see here. So what I'm going to do first is add some text. And when I add the text, it'll come at the 2-inch level from the back. So to add text, I click on the T, and I need to select my font. I'm using just any old fat font will do. I cut the other day a nice skinny font and it was beautiful, but I'm going to use the Accent SF because it's nice and fat. You could click on that down arrow and pick any of the fonts that are installed in your computer. Once you select it, it's in the window. Then you can click your cursor, your mouse, right on the card and then type in your words. And all the text comes in in capital letters. So I'm going to type in Irish and then click on Add. If I didn't click uppercase, let's see what would happen. Oh, look at that. It comes in lowercase. But there's a reason that we want to uppercase, and that is for pop-up cards. Uppercase tends to be able to be easier to work with in terms of getting the shapes to make pop-up cards easier. So I leave mine on uppercase, then you click on Add to add it to your screen. Now this down here is kind of a shadow of this, so we can ignore these purple shapes. What we're looking at is the ones in light blue here. Now that I'm done with the text, I'm going to click on the top arrow on the left, which is a selection arrow, and you notice when I click it that all the text is highlighted in yellow. That means it's selected. Now the first thing I want to do is change this. The top edges are going to be, I want them to stick to the back of the card, and I want the bottom edge to stick to the bottom of the card, but no letters will stick anywhere if they're not perfectly horizontally shaped. So what I need to do is grab my cropping tool, which is the fourth tool on the left, and make sure inclusive rectangle is selected. Then I'm going to kind of hold my mouse over the top of this word to see if I cut a straight line, where would I get a straight line in every letter, because I want every letter connected. So right there I'm going to left click and drag, and then I'm going to try to get the bottom white line also high enough so that each letter has a horizontal plane on it. So as soon as I let go of my mouse, it made straight lines on the bottom and the tops of the letters. So now that I've got my letters cropped, I'm ready to resize them. To resize them again, I'm going to go back to the selection arrow at the top of the left toolbar. When I click it, then my letters are selected. And now I want to resize them. And there's I'd like to make my letters as wide as I can. Now my card is 5.5 inches wide, and I want to leave a little margin, so I'm going to make my letters 5 inches wide. So I'm going to go down to Position and Size on the right-hand side of the screen, and my lock is unlocked because I'm going to resize these to be exactly the size I want. I want them on the width, I want it to be 5 inches wide, and then I have to press Enter. And that resizes to 5 inches. Now high, if you remember, I set my position to 2 inches from the back, and I want my letters to fold over exactly in the center. That means that the height of my letters needs to be double the 2 inches. 2 inches for the front and 2 inches for the top. So I'm going to make the height 4 and press Enter. Now I have some really tall letters, but that's okay. I want them to be centered on the card, so we have some nice align and distribute tools which will do all the work for us. This centers the letters vertically on the card, and this one will attach them or align to the bottom of the page. So now I have my letters anchored to the bottom. I'll turn it around so you can see that they're anchored here. And another way to make sure that they're firmly anchored is to go to File and Print Preview, and I see that I've got red dashed lines at the bottom of my letters. That lets me know that they are anchored, and they will be they've got fold lines there instead of cutting lines. So I'm right-clicking and dragging back. I could just click on that tool there again to take me straight on. This reset zoom. Now what I want to do is fold these letters perfectly in half. And to do that, I have a tool at the bottom of the screen called Fold. And when you hover your mouse over any of these tools, it tells you what it does. Not only does it tell you the name of the tool, but if you look on the left side in this space right here, when I hover over a tool, it tells you what that tool does. It says fold the selected group of shapes to the opposite side. So when I click on this, it folds my letters back to the side layer. If there's more than one layer, the other layer would show in this list, but there's no other layer, so it automatically folded it back to the back. So I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So we have the tops of the letters here and the fronts of the letters here. Now you could do any word this way, and you could call the card finished. Very simple. Let's check our lines though to make sure that it's all connected and looks the way it should. I go to File, Print Preview. Now I see that there are valley folds. Any lines that are going to be folded with a valley will be red, dotted lines. And at the bottom we have some red dotted lines. And then right up the middle, over the letters, we have blue dotted lines, which represent mountain folds. Then on the sides, these will be folded back into valley folds. So if I get to this stage of my design and the dotted lines are missing, then I know that I need to fix my design so that the edges are anchored. Usually that has to do with maybe if it didn't anchor, maybe the lines weren't straight or perfectly horizontal. So I have this word here, 2 inches back and 2 inches down. So do we have any questions so far?
None so far.
No questions so far.
Okay. So I like to, in my PCS Toots group, I did post a similar design to this specifically to give people a chance to try something very easy. Now if we want to go further and we want to add something, let's say we want to add text to the bottom of the card here, anything that goes on the very bottom of the card or on the very back of the card will need to be in a stencil style, or when you cut it, the centers of a design would fall out. I'll show you that. To put text on a plane, we're going to first have to move this grid to that plane. So to do that, I'm going to press a space bar, and it'll transfer the grid from the back of the card to the bottom of the card, just like that. Now you notice that the grid went to the top plane. I can move it down either by going to the position on the right side of the screen and typing 0, or the other way to do it is hold the Control and Shift key and use the scroll wheel. Is that right? Yes, wasn't working. Hold the Control and Shift key and use the wheel on your mouse to scroll all the way down. And that's often faster than going over here and typing in the 0, but it works either way. So to put things on the back of the card, I want to have the bottom of this design showing. Now I can right-click and drag down to see more of this, and then I can hold the Control key and right-click and drag up to center it more on the screen. So I'm going to right-click and turn this so I can work better. Now to zoom in, I use my scroll wheel up, and that gets me a little closer. So I'm going to click on the T on the left side, and then click my mouse anywhere on the card, and I'm going to type in blessings, and then click on Add. Now when I click on the selection arrow again, it's all highlighted, selecting my text. Now it's obviously way too wide for my card. So I'm going to go over here to width and type in 5 and enter, because my card is 5.5 inches wide, and I want it all to fit nicely. So the next thing I will do is click on the vertical center, and then I can leave it this size, or I can make it bigger. I can make the text bigger by making sure the straight arrows, you toggle between the rotation arrows and the straight arrows just by left clicking. So if I want these taller, I can just drag it out to be taller. Then I can click and drag to position it if I want. Or I could indicate the exact size over here. Maybe I want my letters to be 1.25 inches high and press enter. Then it resizes that. So I'm going to hold a control and right click up so I can see my letters a little better, and zoom in on that B, and I'll show you what I mean by making your letters a stencil. These letters are just going to cut out of the background. But if we cut out the B, it's just going to look like the outside lines, because these pieces will just fall out unless you go find them after you cut them and glue them back in on a backing. But I hate to hunt for little pieces, so I always make the inside, any letter that has inside shapes, I always make them a stencil by going over to the left toolbar and clicking on the eraser tool. Now the width of this eraser is by default, I believe, 1 millimeter. You could make it narrower, but 1 millimeter works for me. I also have the straight line option selected so that any line that I draw or erase in this instance is going to be straight. So I'm just going to find the place where I want to start my lines, where you see where the blue line goes right through the middle of those pieces. So I'm just going to left click my mouse, hold it, and drag right through the middle of these letters. And when I can move it, before I release the mouse, I can kind of position it where I want. And then I'm going to release the mouse, and it automatically erases the middle. Now I have two pieces that will cut out of the back, but you can still tell that it's a B. The other thing that I could do is use a stencil alphabet created for this, but when it's just one letter that needs to be fixed, I find it's much easier just to do that. Now my letters will be cut out of the base of the card, so I can go to print preview again and see that these letters will cut out of the bottom of the card. And I should name my file. I should have named it, saved it as a long time ago. I'll just save it as Irish with my initials so I know I made it, and save. Now I could put a design on the top of the back of the card if I want. I'll click again on the zoom reset, the third magnifying glass here. And so now I have some working space here. I thought maybe, oh, I know, shamrock would be nice. I can make a shamrock stencil, pretty simple. If I click on the heart, that takes me to some of the shapes built in to Popup Card Studio. I'm going to click on generic and just get me one of these hearts. I double click on it and it's added. And you notice that it was added down here, but I wanted it up here. Well, while it's selected, you know it's selected because it has yellow around it, I'm going to use Control-Z to cut it. Now I'm going to press the space bar to get to the back of the card and put that position to 0. So now I'm on the back of the card, and I'm going to press Control-V after I press that selection arrow to get my heart to the back of the card. Well, I need 3 hearts, so we have a duplicate button down here at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to click on the duplicate, and I'd like 3 columns and 1 row, and I'm going to click on accept. So I would like to, I'm going to click away from that so I can select each one. I'm going to rotate this one by clicking on it and clicking again to toggle to rotation arrows. I'm going to just rotate it around to the side and kind of move it close to but not touching this other heart, because I'm making a stencil. If the pieces touch, then the whole thing might fall out. It wouldn't be too bad to have the whole thing cut out because there's no inside shapes, but I kind of like the stencil look. I'm going to click this and I'm going to rotate it the other way and drag that over here, kind of close. I've got my snapping set on 1/8 of an inch, so it'll keep them pretty close together. And then I think what I'll do, I'm clicking and dragging around to select those 3, and I'm going to click on the join tool to join them as one unit, so that when I click the center tool, that they'll go right to the center without me having to worry about finding the center myself. I'm going to move it up a little because I think I'd like to add another basic shape. I'll click on the library, and there's a crescent here. Double click that. To get a stem, I'll just use the eraser tool to kind of erase it. Oh, that's a cropping tool. Oh, I could use it. I could use the cropping tool to just select a part of this that I want. And it's cropped, and now I can use it as a stem. So I'm going to rotate it. And just kind of move it into position. And I can zoom in by rolling my mouse wheel. And I think I'll move this down. Now it won't move down where I want it because it's got snapping on it 1/8 of an inch. So if you can't move it everything exactly where you want it, you can click on this arrow right next to step snapping and change the snapping to a smaller increment to allow you to make finer adjustments. I think I would even like to make this smaller. Then you can just put it where you want. Now that I've got those the way that I like them, they're a little bit too wide for my taste. So I'm going to join them all together by clicking on the join. And I'm just going to drag this in a little bit. And then center it. So now when I zoom back out and I drag down a little bit so you can see it, and control right arrow and slide it up so you can see here, then I can kind of right click and rotate it to see how it looks. Then I could get a virtual snapshot or a nice picture of how it's going to look by clicking on this window here from a virtual snapshot, and it will render a pretty good idea of what this is going to look like once it's cut. Sometimes if there are problems in your design, they'll show up there. And it's kind of nice to save this design to your computer so that when you have it in your folder, you can actually see a picture of the design before you open it. In order to save this picture, you could save it either as a small thumbnail or as a larger picture. And so if you want to save it, that picture, if you're happy with it, you can click on export and render to a PNG file or project thumbnail. I usually like to do a high quality one, but I'll just, for time's sake, I'll do standard quality, and it'll assign the name of the file to your image, and then when it's done rendering it, it'll give you a little signal to know that you can look at it to see if you like it. Meanwhile, we can go back to File, Print Preview to make sure all of our lines are looking like that's a signal that the design is done. The low quality gives you a dark image, which I don't care for. That's why I always do a high quality one, but it takes more time. So we want to go to Print Preview and make sure that all of our lines look the way that we want them to look. Well, it looks good to me. One thing that happens though sometimes when you're cutting these, you have all these little pieces on the bottom, and it's helpful to keep these pieces in for stability when they go all the way through. But if you don't want those pieces, then you can get rid of those. I like to keep them, again, so the card will stand up. And if you want to know how to get rid of them, then you can look at last week's webinar for the instructions on that. Now, if I'm ready to cut this design, before I go on, anybody have any questions?
There are no questions at this point for you.
No.
Everybody already knows all these things. That's okay. I'm way behind Susan in learning this software, but I know that there are a lot of people who would like to use it, and I remember when I first opened it up and started playing with it that I felt very clumsy, so I thought I'd give you something very simple tonight to help you with that. Now, if I want to cut this design, first I'm going to save it again because I changed it a little, and then to cut, you go to File and you go to Export and Project Rendering. Now, let me go to Public Gallery first. You know what? I could put this in the Public Gallery, and I could put the entire project there, and give it a name. I'll call this Irish Blessings. I'll call this holidays here, and basic pop-up card design by Julie for February 18th webinar, and upload. Now, there's no way to retrieve it yet, but Andy assures me that one of these days when we get enough designs that excuse me, we will be able to access all these nice designs that people have uploaded. So when that day comes, and you'll be able to get that file and use it. Meanwhile, we can export also as an SVG file if we wanted to maybe make some decorations to add, or if we wanted to add color to any of the letters. We might want to export as SVG. It gives it the same name, but it makes it an SVG file, so then you just click on Save, and it will be ready to use in your software, any software that uses SVG. And then, let's see, if we want to cut to our printer, our cutter, we would also go to Export and then Project Rendering to Machine. When you click on To Machine, you select your machine, and the machines that show up here will be all the ones that you have plugins for Make the Cut. So let's say I select the Zing, right here in this particular window is very important. If you're going to right now you want to cut the mountain lines, the valley, and the hinge lines and the cut lines all at once. You leave them all selected, which show in orange. But if you want to, and I recommend that you not cut them all at once, because these little dotted lines, unless you're very careful, can cause your fold lines to tear. I recommend that you do your score lines first at a lower cutting pressure if you're going to use your blade to do it. You could use a embossing tool or an engraving tool, or you can use your blade at a lower pressure that will just scrape the surface of your paper and allow you to fold it easily but not cut all the way through. Then leave your then you could go ahead and begin your cutting, and then, and I'm not connected, so you're going to set your force and your speed, and then you can just begin cutting. Then when you're finished, leave the mat in the machine, leave the blade right where it is, and then click on Cut Lines and turn off all of your score lines, and then go ahead and cut it again. And then, but don't forget to put your blade pressure back to cutting. You're cutting. When I'm using embossing tool, I don't change my force between the cutting and embossing, but if you're using your blade, you're going to want to use much less force for scoring. So I always do my first one, my prototype I call it, I do my first one in practice paper, because that's where I will see all of my mistakes in my design. If there are, and when you're first starting this, you make a lot of mistakes, at least I do. So this is where you change your design, what you're going to be cutting or scoring here. And then when you're done cutting, you can click on Finished. Now, if you would like to, I like to use my embossing tool or engraving tool. I can go to Preferences and change some of those. I guess this is not where we do it in Preferences. Is it in Rendering Options? If suppose that I would like, right here we have short dashes selected for hinge lines, and short dashes for valley lines, and short dashes for mountain lines. If you want to do solid lines, if you're using an embossing tool, that'll work better. You can change the solid lines for all of these, and then you can save that. That was under File and Rendering Options, so that the lines would show up and print preview. It would show up as solid lines, and you'd only do this if you were going to use another tool or your blade at a lower force setting. And since sometimes I forget and I go to cut, and it'll slice your whole project and ruin it, you might want to leave them as dashed and just score the dash lines with rather than changing it to solid. But this can give you a cleaner look on your cards. Any other questions I haven't covered?
Not at this point.
Okay, well, the only other thing that I could think of is if we wanted to make a rainbow of colors for the letters, before we folded them over, we would have copied and pasted to make the cut, and I didn't do that. But then I could leave these letters here and then cut out colored ones to lay over them. But when Andy gets his other nice little export shapes thing done, then we would be able to cut the letters, just export these shapes and make the cut. Another thing that I do is I make a template for cutting the backing of this card. I make my backing a 1/2 inch wider and taller than the original card. And we have this thing in here under basic shapes of, you could put your own shapes in there. So you can put other cards, your shapes. So I put some shapes in there. But really, to do let's say I want to do a backing card, all I have to do is open a new file and change this to 6 by 4.5 and press enter and create. Now I have a card that's half the size of my original, that is just a little bigger than my original. So now I can go to File, Print Preview, and you see I've got my card all ready to cut, and I can render it just plain like this. And that would be my backing card. So I might name this save as backing, card backing. Then I don't have to remember every time what I wanted to do. And then to put this together, I would take this back, I would fold this all in half carefully and place it on the bottom of my backing with this closed. And with it closed, I will put the glue on the outside and make sure the hinges are all in there, and then close this lid. We have this nice little thing here that we can simulate opening and closing on the View Properties tab. So I close the card and hold it there until my glue dries, and then I open it up and I flip it over so that now the bottom of the card is up here, and now I'm going to put glue on all the back of all the pieces, back of this, and then close my card again and hold it firmly until the glue dries, and then when I open it up, the pieces will stay and pop up.